Chris the other day what he thought of the season. So what did you think of the season as a whole?
Listen, anytime you're having your end of season press conference before the playoffs start, there's something missing, clearly. And I think it's important for us to kind of keep that perspective, even in a year where, certainly externally, I don't think people expected that of us, and even internally, our priorities were more kind of laying a foundation for future success. And on that side of it, I'm really proud of a lot that we accomplished. On the surface at the major league level, really thrilled with the big league staff and what happened up here. There was a ton of development. Some of the results of that you saw, very clearly. Joey Gallo, a great example of that. Some of it took a lot longer and was kind of, just such a real credit to Chris and his staff as far as even when there were some speed bumps or a little bit of resistance along the way or the message didn't take instantly with certain guys. They were creative. They took another approach. They were patient. They showed real feel for how to get buy-in up and down throughout the club. And from that regard, I think we're in a much better position going forward because I think we're going to be able to hit the ground running here really this week from a planning standpoint for next year, and then certainly, throughout the off season with the development that'll happen, at the big league level, and then into camp next year. I think the work that these guys put in this year will has put us in a better position for that to take place. I thought we saw some guys really step forward and make clear kind of that there are certain spots. Lance Lynn, obvious one that feel really good about moving forward. Other guys that while there were some signs of progress behind the scenes, the results weren't there, at least to this point, and so we know we've got some work to do. But all in all, again, with the caveat that we want to be playing right now and prepping an advanced meeting for a postseason game. And anytime that doesn't happen, you haven't accomplished the ultimate goal. But knowing what we were looking at coming into the year and laying the foundation for future success, really pleased with that piece of it.
You said laying the foundation was the priority this year. What is going to be the priority next year?
Yeah, I mean, at this point last year, we were starting a search for major league manager. We were looking to hire, new coaching staff, new major league trainer, an assistant GM, a farm director. We were restructuring our R&D department, and all the same. Our scouts, our analysts, our pro scouting group was doing great work in identifying Lance Lynn and Danny Santana and others that we acquired. This year, there's still some work to do from an organizational infrastructure standpoint, but our focus is much more on putting the club together for next year. We expect to take steps forward, but that'll be both internally, with development of our guys, competition that's been created from guys that are on the big league club as well as guys that are pushing up through the system, and then obviously our efforts to supplement externally, whether it's via free agency or trades. We're still in the process of putting our strategy together for the winter, but we'll be looking to improve the club.
JD, when you decided to make a change in the manager, the chart was talk about new voice, new message. Clearly, having 11 months after introducing Chris and knowing the message he had, talk about how that's kind of been taken in that clubhouse. And you said it a minute ago, it's kind of set a foundation, but just how that message has been received and just the difference it is from 11 months ago.
Yeah, we just finished, on Sunday, I think we had our last one. We did exit interviews with every player up here. And then yesterday we did exit interviews with all the coaches. And a lot of it was I was kind of sitting back and taking notes. I'd ask some questions here and there, but the dialogue between Chris and his staff, between Chris and his players, was just it was a really good feeling for me to be able to sit back and watch it. Just the candor, and he was delivering some truth and some challenging messages in some of them, and but it wasn't that wasn't the first time they'd heard it, right? I made a comment to Woody yesterday that there were times during the year where I wanted to kind of like push on certain things, and ultimately I deferred to him, and as I going through this process, talking to the players and talking to the staff, I could see his his process at work, where he just has a really even hand in dealing with situations. There's urgency. I mean, I would see after games he'd be whether not necessarily with a win or a loss, but there would be things that he would want to address, but there was he would talk to his staff or talk to different people, and there was a real kind of measured approach, and he was always kind of playing the long game, where he knew that he was going to need at some point to to push harder, and there were times where he did right away, and times where he felt like I've got to. I've got to let this one go for a little while or deal with it at a less emotional point. That was really impressive for me. Just having not having had done this before, that he was able to do that. Able to understand kind of when to throttle down, understand when to step on the gas a little bit, and I think the players responded to it. Some bought in right away last winter. Some bought in spring training. Some was more recent here during the season. Everybody kind of goes at their own pace, but I think his style resonated with the guys, and I think it will lead to a lot of good things for us.
John, now that you guys went through the process of redoing a lot of things with your organization, when do you feel like the results for a competitive sort of playoff caliber team should come? Do you have a timeline for something like that?
Yeah, it's a great question, Mac. Last winter when we had our organizational meetings before spring training, we talked about, very loosely, we talked about 2019, that we weren't going to set any limits on the club, that obviously we would have loved to have been ahead of schedule. And I think for the first half of the season, the players, staff, they kept us in it. It was a lot of fun, and our fans felt the same way. Ultimately, we weren't good enough yet this year. But we talked at that same time about 2020 with the new stadium and some additional resources that we thought we could take a real step, and certainly every year after that we think it's the expectation is for us to contend. So that's kind of where we are. I use that term taking steps because I think it's really really challenging to sit here and say, like, identify a year, circle it on the calendar. We want to get better, and I hope it's I hope the efforts of everybody in the organization enable us to be sitting here talking about postseason baseball next year. I'm not going to sit here and guarantee anything because we got a lot of work to do before then.
John, at this point, I know you've got the entire offseason to kind of go, but usually at this point in time, teams have identified a payroll or a budget target or anything like that. What kind of instructions have you been given in terms of those additional resources going forward?
Yeah, I've got a general range. I'm talking with Ray and with ownership and the rest of the leadership group. I've kind of an idea of a range that we'll be in. Listen, we're organizationally, we're still going through the process of planning for next year, not just for the big league club, but for everything that goes with running a business and a business of this size. And obviously there's going to be a number of unknowns when we haven't operated this building before and et cetera. So it'll be higher. Our Major League payroll will be up from where it was this year, but I don't have an exact number just yet.
Significantly higher?
I'll let you know on opening day.
What are your priorities as far as positions that need to be addressed beyond? I mean, obviously starting pitch is number one, but what other positions do you feel like you need to address strongly?
I think in early conversations here, like I said, we haven't really had our full strategy meetings yet. We will here this month. Early conversations, I think starting pitching and third base are probably the top two on the list. And there are a number of other areas that we can improve. We have, candidates to compete for spots at both, the rotation and third base, but I think to create the level, create the level of competition that we want at a variety of spots, we'd like to add from the outside in those areas. And, I think there's clear opportunity for us to, take big incremental improvements in those areas. There are other spots that we need to improve. First base, catcher, center field, bullpen are all areas that that you can improve. I think realistically we're going to improve some of that externally, and some of those spots will be the product of improvement from our own players, both from the work they put in this winter and just from the realities that what competition breeds.
In going through that laundry list, you didn't mention the middle infield spots. What is your thought on where you guys stand on the middle infielders right now?
Yeah, kind of that for me falls in a category of we need, for us to win a championship, we need significantly better performance out of those spots, and that's just being honest. And I think we've been had very clear conversations with Elvis, with Rugi, and other guys competing for spots that they'll be the first to talk about it and first to understand kind of what needs to happen. I know what they're capable of. We know what they're capable of. Really felt like the last stretch of the season, there was, forget about the results on the field, there was a lot more kind of understanding what they need to do and buy into the way that we're looking to play and the way that we're looking to prepare, maybe a better way to put it. But I think going into this next year, like a lot of who plays and where they hit in the lineup and all these sort of things that that Woody will ultimately decide, like it's going to be dictated on the work put in this winter, and and it's a domino effect, right? If we add a third baseman, that creates additional competition at the middle infield spots, because some of those guys that might have competed for third base are now looking for at bats elsewhere, whether it's Danny or Solak or Kiner or these guys. So I think that's healthy. I think regardless of kind of where you're at in your career, I think some level of pressure and accountability and competition is a healthy thing, and we're going to embrace it.
Chris, question for you. Hey, having finished your playing career not that long ago, and having played with a few of these guys and had a real good relationship with them, did that pose any kind of problems or challenges for you to manage this club the way you wanted to, because some of these guys had been peers at some point, and now there's a clear delineation there?
Yeah, no, I don't think so. I mean, this is my 7th year coaching. I got into coaching first in Seattle. There's a couple guys on that team that I had actually played with, because I had played with Seattle not too long before that. So there's always been a line. There's always been a line drawn as a coach. So when I got into this job, it's a pretty easy transition. I'm actually probably harder on those guys than I am on the guys I haven't played with, because most of those guys kind of know what I'm about, know my expectations, from a cultural standpoint, from a gameplay standpoint. So no, I don't think it posed any problem. I think it actually really helped, because it's a lot of they knew what I was as a teammate, and now they see the way I lead as a manager. It's similar. I haven't changed who I am, and they know that. They know that obviously there is a line drawn. When I do coach, I actually was coaching in LA when we signed Jesse. We traded for Jesse Chavez, and that was a different, because we had just played together 2 or 3 years earlier. So he had kind of seen the difference, obviously, when that line is kind of drawn. But those guys actually were some of my biggest drivers for what I was trying to do in the clubhouse, and they really helped a lot.
John, do you guys have to trade from the left-handed hitting corner outfielder pool to make the roster work better?
I don't know if we have to trade from it necessarily, but I mean, when everyone's healthy, we have more left-handed hitting corner guys than we have spots for. So I think it makes sense to look at it. In the past when we've engaged in those discussions, either some guys weren't established up here yet, and so there was less pressure, or we had maybe somebody was banged up at a certain point in time. But listen, we're going to definitely look at it this winter. I mean, I think it makes sense to. We've looked at it in the past, talked about it in July even a little bit, but I think this winter it probably does make sense to look at that because we've got other needs, and if we line up with somebody, if not, it'll be some competition, and we'll sort through it.
John, you have Mike Minor and Lance Lynn in your rotation, and you have 3 other spots that are open. How many of those spots do you want to fill from outside, and how many do you want to leave for somebody inside?
We haven't talked through that enough for me to give you whether it's 1 or 2 or 3. I do want to create some competition amongst that young group of starters, where the more we supplement from the outside, 1, the more time we give those guys to develop. 2, the more I think we'll see the best out of them. So I would expect we'll add at least 1, if not more, kind of established starting pitchers. That'll be our goal going into the winter. But it's too early for me to say, whether that's 1 or multiple.
What else? Stephen and Evan.
Chris, I'll ask you this, and JD, I'd like to hear your response to this as well. I know you guys want to base on the whole season, and you want to still be playing. What was the significance, though, at the end of June of being over 10 games over 500 and basically being right there on top of the wild card, and to kind of get a glimpse of some of these guys on what's possible if we can sustain for a whole year?
Yeah, I was really grateful that, not from a selfish standpoint, but from a team standpoint, that we had success early on. Just being in contention and, 10 games over 500, we go into that series against Tampa. I think that was the height of that. And, that series in Boston, when you can actually get a young group, we created a new philosophy, new culture. Some of these guys obviously been here, new expectations. But when you have that winning atmosphere and you get to play in important games like that, and we fought, man. We were right there. We had a really good series against Boston, and those are things that, as we move forward now, I've said this before, we got a little bit exposed, but for a number of different reasons. Not only just from a lack of experience standpoint, being able to sustain success is really hard in this game, from an individual standpoint and from a team standpoint. To be really good and to be really relevant for 162, I think that my past experiences kind of made me realize how hard it really is, and obviously, John, in this situation here, in 10 and 11, how hard it is to win, and I keep driving that home to our players, because sometimes as players they get, I wouldn't say complacent, but they get comfortable, and they get like, okay, this is it, I got it figured out. The second that a player tells me they got it figured out, I'm waiting for the fall, because I don't want that mentality. I want that mentality of just keep driving, keep pushing, even if we're the best. If we have the best team in baseball, I want us to keep driving and keep pushing, keep separating yourself, and that's where I look at next year, and I'm grateful that we were winning, but I didn't want to lose. I don't want to be sitting here right now, like John said, having a press conference. I want to have my hat and my uniform on, talking about who we're going to play in the postseason, and that will never stop. But our players need to understand there's a commitment every day that, and they did that. And I'm not trying to say that we didn't do that, but there's certain things we had to learn, and unfortunately we had to lose a little bit to learn it. And it was actually, I was grateful for both. The fact that we won and then the fact that we lost, because I don't want to be sitting here, but at the same time we learned a lot, and we better learn through loss. We better learn through failure. If we don't, we're not accomplishing anything. So I feel like our players did. There's a lot of exposure there for a while that we kept bringing it up, and I mean, the number of conversations now that I reflect back from spring training to now, I was like, wow, we did accomplish a lot in delivering a message, but we still got to keep going. You know what I mean? And these players understand that our expectation, my expectation, is to never quit. And so you look at what we went through this year, it was very, very necessary for a lot of these guys at the end of the year to finally okay, I get it, I understand it. And we can't lose that. The offseason is just an extension. A lot of these guys have to make serious gains in the offseason, for some physically, some mentally. There's a ton that has to go on. We don't just go home and, sit in front of the TV and watch football. We have to really think about some things that we need to improve on, and like I said, win the offseason so we can come back next year and hit the ground running.
John, when you talk about the idea of competition, and you mentioned a couple names, guys who have played all over the field for you, but when I look at the organization, I look at the lower levels of the minor league. You guys had tremendous success, showed some real progress there. There still seems to be a little bit of a gap between guys who, outside of maybe the starting pitchers, who might create competition for other guys next year. And the question I guess I'm getting at is, how do you create that competition internally for some of those positions around the diamond? Not the pitching, but the position players.
Well, I think some of that's already happened, right? I mean, you look at, we were a little banged up at the end with some guys, but on a day-to-day basis, Woody would be debating, which of these guys do I give a day here? Because he wanted, there were more guys that we wanted to see, wanted to play, wanted to find out about, that were putting the work in, that deserved it. And I think that as we add externally this winter, that's only going to grow. I mean, I think as we, if we lock in on, somebody outside that's going to play on a regular basis, that's just shrinks the number of at-bats, shrinks the number of spots that you guys are competing for, and I think that'll will help that. But we think there are some other guys at the upper levels that will be in big league camp that can factor in, whether that's on day one or down the line. And you mentioned that on the starting pitching side, again, to Tiara's question, if we address externally there, then a number of guys that got some time up here in the big leagues this year will in a good scenario will be at AAA and competing for the next opportunity there as well.
I'm wondering about your feelings on three specific players: Hunter Pence, Sean Kelly, and Jeff Mathis. How do you view those three guys going forward?
I have ultimate respect for all three. Hunter, just wildly exceeded my personal expectations. I don't want to speak for anybody else. He was as advertised as a teammate and person in the clubhouse, and then on the field. For him to make the All-Star team, get voted in, was, and deservedly so, was it's pretty special. Unfortunately, got kind of banged up at the end and had the back issue. But I talked to Hunter a little while ago, a week or so ago, and when he decided that he wasn't going to push it anymore, his back wasn't going to allow him, and thanked him for everything he did this year. As far as next year, I told him, on one hand, it's an absolute no-brainer that we'd love to have him back, right? Just everything I just said, he fits perfectly culture-wise and right-hand hitting, presence, and the things that we want to do from a hitting side and process side. He's all about them. And I also told him, the flip side, we just ran through our corner positions, and we arguably are +1 right now, and they're all left-handed, so right-handed could certainly fit better. But we got to sort through that as far as. So I told him, we're going to stay in touch. We would have a level of interest, and we just kind of keep him posted and be very honest as we move forward. Sean, really stepped up in a huge way early, and until he had that little deal in Houston that day, maybe our most reliable reliever for a stretch. While we were in contention in the first half, he was huge for us. And I think Woody was we all were. Organizationally, our scouts and everybody was very cognizant of it. But I thought Woody was really particular about the kind of veterans that we wanted to bring in this winter. and so we were, and these guys all fit in that category, really kind of helping to advance the ball from a culture standpoint. And then, the cherry on top was these guys produced at a really high level. We've got an option on Sean for next year. We haven't made that decision yet. We haven't communicated that with him. So, we'll go through it and talk to him and then kind of let you guys know what we're deciding there. And then Jeff, we signed to a 2-year deal with the thought that we wanted to improve defensively behind the plate, and not just kind of the things that you can measure, but handling our staff and kind of as an extension of the coaches on the field from a game planning standpoint. That side, I thought he did really well. I don't know how much credit Mike Miner would give Jeff, but I know it contributed. He caught him a ton, helped him take a step there. I thought he helped just overall with our game planning side. Obviously, some of the numbers more on the physical side were down from years past. And I think a lot of that, we talked about that the other day, a lot of that was we pushed him. We caught him a lot more at, 37 years old in the heat here than he's caught in a while. And we knew going in that was going to be a challenge for him, but we felt like we wanted to kind of get the experienced veteran game planning side, prioritize that. So, he played through a number of aches and pains all year and never complained about it. And I know he was bummed he couldn't be out there more at the end.
What else? Jeff?
On the budget, how much of that will be geared toward extension candidates? And well, I mean, Joey and Mike seem like the two guys off the top of our heads, on my head.
Just too early in the process for me to really address that right now. Obviously, both guys had, Mike had a great season. Joey, before the injury, had a great year. Glad they're Rangers, and we'll address that at the appropriate time. But just too early in the process for me to say. Is there interest in extensions with them? On the surface, absolutely.
Yeah, Woody, I just want to talk about the progress you saw in Jose Trevino as a catcher, and you see your front runner for next year.
Yeah, I mean, Jose, I was really impressed. I think he came as advertised from a catching standpoint. The one thing that I was really impressed, I had heard amazing things about him as a human being, as a leader, and I think as good as people talked about him in that regard, I think he actually exceeded the expectations. I saw him as a young player, take some pitchers and pull them aside and really lead them out on the field. So from a defensive standpoint, I was really, really impressed. Offensively, I felt like early on, I didn't really know what to expect, and I watched him work every day in the cage. I talked to Louie and Krabby and Alex from an offensive standpoint. Okay, what's this guy capable of? Can he hit? Can he not? What's getting in the way? And the progress that I saw from an offensive standpoint, what I saw at the end of the season, and I don't know if that's going to play out for 100, as a starting catcher for 90 to 100 games, but it was really, really impressive. I mean, he handled some tough pitching. We go to Houston, he's facing Verlander. He got some of the best swings off of probably the best pitcher in the game right now. And had no fear. The thing I saw from a swing mechanic standpoint was a lot better. His sequencing was better. Like I said, his swings, his at bats, his approach, he would go up there looking for certain pitches and certain counts, and he was hitting them. The other night against Ottavino, that's one of the best right-handers in baseball. He strikes out 70% of the guys, I feel like, and he had the best at bat against him and hit a rocket up the middle. So. I don't know. I mean, I think it's a healthy competition, and I think that he definitely put his name on the list and opened my eyes a lot, and I think that that's going to help him, as we go into next year.
John, this question's for you, but I'm going to paraphrase Woody, so if I get this wrong, correct me. But Woody talked a little bit at the end of the season about the communication and the language and how you guys had presented information to the big league hitters and the idea of getting that across to the minor leaguers as well, right? How much of a focus, when you talk about infrastructure now, how much of a focus is the idea of kind of creating that collaborative language from the minor leagues to the major leagues with your hitters? And did you see that as any kind of an issue this year?
I think that's our goal throughout. I mean, whether it's hitting or any area of the organization that you want. When guys get to the big leagues, you don't want them to have to learn anything new, whether it's terminology or techniques. There's enough on their plate when they get up here from a routine standpoint and the pressures of performance and on this stage and the first time dealing with media this size. I mean, all those sort of things that it's a huge part of our job to make it as seamless as possible. I think Woody and these guys had a ton on their plate this year, but I feel like the relationships between the big leagues and the minor leagues are probably as good as they've been in a while. We got a number of our guys from the minor leagues here today, literally here right now, and Mike and Corey and Matt, and then we've got our futures camp here, and that Woody and a number of our coaches are participating in, and it's a big focus for us, because we've got to get this group right. The group coming up through the system. I mean, that's as good as I put. We've got to get them right. We've got to get them ready to whatever role they're going to play. They've got to play it at a championship level, and so the more we can do from an education standpoint, preparation standpoint, this early stage of their career, getting them comfortable with everything that we're going to be focused on at the big league level. And I know that's what these guys are putting together here. We're playing TCU tonight, and they're basically going through it the same day that they would go through if they were here in the big leagues. And that's just one day, just one example, but it's there's been a lot of that throughout the system this year. With the exception of some of the injuries that we had early on, which was there's obviously a real challenge, especially on the pitching side. I think we got a ton accomplished this year. It's always about development, but we won with really young clubs throughout the system, and our staffs did really, really good jobs. We implemented a ton of things from a data side and a tech side, and I think you're going to have some speed bumps here and there, but we did it with a lot of success, and a lot of new initiatives that took some time to get rolling. Once they did, I think they're really well received.
John, there's several major league manager vacancies. Are you concerned if Rangers losing any coach to a managerial job?
I wouldn't use the word concern because, quite frankly, I think we've got a number of folks here that deserve consideration. I've advocated for a couple guys already with some people that were kind of putting their lists together, and would continue to do so because we've got some really good people. Sometimes I think there's the reality is when you don't win, you're not playing the postseasons at the big league level. People might get overlooked. I know for sure we had more people called on when in 11 and 12 than we did after 14, right? For kind of obvious reasons, but. We got some really, really good people here that I don't want to lose them, but I think a big part of our job is to help develop our people and then advocate for them when they're ready for opportunities, and we've got some people that are ready.
Chris, you're going to talk to the futures guys here in a little bit. What is your message to them about, just what's your message to them?
Obviously, I could probably talk to these guys for hours. Kind of like I talked to our big league ball club all year. So one thing I want to make sure that's clear is, my expectations and our expectations when they get here. I think that's, we want to create an understanding of when they're in the minor leagues, whether they're in A-ball, AA, or AAA, that, they know what to expect when they get here. And like having them run through basically a day with us talking to our, I know Louis talked to him. I know, Brett, all these guys have gone out of their way to kind of show these guys, what we do from a information standpoint. And then now they hear from me today, tell them what my expectations of being a champion are, honestly. I think that's, we're trying to create, we're always trying to develop players, but develop championship players, I think, is you need to be a little bit more specific, because sometimes we get caught up in, we make this guy a good player, but does he fit into a championship, arena? Can he go out and compete at a championship level, conduct himself as a champion in the clubhouse, and what are those expectations? And I think that I'm going to kind of hit on some of those, and they're our future. I mean, it's important. I sat and watched after our day game the other day. It was really cool for me to kind of sit and watch them play for 12 innings. I actually really enjoyed that, because those guys are going to be playing in our ballpark soon, and for me to kind of get my eyes on them, get to know them a little bit, give them a few high fives in the dugout was pretty cool. And I'm going to rely on these guys. These guys are, like I said, they're going to be contributors to us winning a championship someday. And I think it's important that they hear from me and hear that I'm watching. We're always watching, and we have really, really high expectations for them, but let them understand what those are.
And John, sorry. How much do the minor leagues play into free agency this year? Because third base, you guys drafted a third baseman. Leote's probably close in center field. It would seem that I don't know what effect that would have.
It'll be a consideration. I mean, it's definitely something we're going to talk about from a standpoint of what are our options. Are you talking about what's the term of the contract, and when do we think we'll have internal championship? To Woody's point, like, are they talking about championship caliber players, or a prospect? But to the point that we feel like we have guys that can develop into championship caliber players, like, definitely consider the timing. And listen, sometimes it's has the opposite effect. Sometimes you can sign somebody or add somebody outside, and that creates depth internally, and whether that creates opportunity from a trade standpoint or creates competition. There's a lot of different ways we can go with it, but we'll factor that in.
On the topic of coaching and minor leaguers, do you have any more announcements as far as like minor league coaching staff vacancies or fillings or any of those goings on?
Not today. We're still working through some things to try to do it organized. But it's, we've been, looking to address some of the openings that we had. A number of them will be filled internally. But we will add a couple of folks from the outside. We'll announce that soon, I think.
John, this kind of hit me when the Red Sox were in town for some reason, but has your Latin American program hit a lull as far as talent coming through the system?
Our so I think we two things. I think one, we've been more patient than from a development standpoint than we were early. So we got, Profar, Odor, Mazzara, all these guys got to the big leagues at 19, 20 years old. And so, we signed them 2.5, 3 years later. They're knocking on the door. I think Maz and Odor jumped straight from, all three of those guys jumped straight from AA. We've been intentionally more patient here. So like Leote, for instance, 20 years old at AA, no doubt he can defend himself at the plate, like already big league caliber type defender. But we want to get him to a higher level, as a complete player, and so I think that has helped to shape that image, because we haven't graduated as many guys. The other thing I think is we took a strategy for a couple of years where we were trying to build a bigger class and build depth, and we didn't necessarily go after the top of the market guy to spend all of our resource pool in one spot. And so a lot of the players that are coming up through the system now, which I think you'll see, you get to know, like more in that category. So I think guys just don't have the kind of Baseball America shine on them because they weren't $3 million, $4 million deals. This year we felt like that was the opportunity in this class, so we went in bigger with Laura and Acosta and that group, and that we felt like that was the time to kind of get back into that, the opportunity to get some higher upside guys that and focus all of our resources in a smaller area, smaller class.
Woody, I know, hi, back here.
Yeah.
This season was somewhat of a classroom setting for a lot of the young guys I know, but it kind of was for you as well. What would you say was the biggest thing you learned in your first year as a manager?
I've been asked that question quite a bit, and I don't think I ever come up with a very good answer. I've learned a lot. Obviously, there's the day-to-day, starting in spring training, starting in the off-season, honestly. And like I said, when I kind of reflect back now that I've had like one day to kind of look, okay, well, how did it all go down? I'm still going to obviously do a lot of reflecting, or I'm probably have a better answer for you in a couple of weeks. But I just learned that, first of all, that I could do the job. You know what I mean? Like that I could handle the day-to-day, and I really, really enjoyed, the day-to-day of, having the countless number of conversations and just, pushing an agenda, pushing a message. I really, really enjoyed that. And there were some tough times, but I feel like, from a staff standpoint and myself, like we prided ourselves on just being the same every day and keep pushing that message regardless of whether we were winning or losing. So, I learned that, it is a long season, which I already knew. I've done this for a long time. But like I said, I think I didn't know how much I would enjoy it. But I feel like that's probably the one thing I've learned, that I really do enjoy, taking pride in being that leader, setting the tone, setting the example, and like I said, in every way. And that was probably the biggest thing that I take away from this year. And obviously, I'm really proud of our players. They've done an amazing job of just, whether I benched them or I played them every day, or pulled them out of a game or kept them in a game, like they understood. I tried to communicate as best I could on every decision, and we had a ton of growth in that locker room. And like I said, I don't want to be sitting here right now, but I feel like the future is being set. It's a little brighter, in a lot of their eyes, which is important, man. They have to believe. Like, it doesn't matter how much belief I have or John has. Like, our players have to believe it, and it's about them becoming champions and believing that they're going to become champions. And I feel like we accomplished a lot in promoting that and getting that belief a little bit better, but in understanding how that's going to happen. So it's I'll give you a better answer probably in a week from now, but after a day, last night I just thought, wow, like that was a lot of conversations and a lot of growth and learning from my side, and how to manage a game, how to deal with things, and I really, really enjoyed it.
Two quick things. John, Chris, have you guys definitively, and if I missed this, I apologize, have you definitively invited all of the Major League staff back for next year, or where do you stand on that? That was the first thing. Second thing was, you talked about infrastructure at the very at the very outset of this presser. Sorry for struggling. How much does biomechanics figure into that infrastructure piece going forward?
First, on the staff, yes, everybody's invited back, and I expect to be back, barring to the other question about if somebody gets an opportunity elsewhere. But yeah, we're real happy with the work the staff's done, and we didn't feel there was any reason to make any changes there. I don't know if I want to get into like all specifics of it. I think that there's a ton of avenues in the game to improve, both for us and industry wide. Some are more established than others. Some are either the industry is just scratching the surface, or we're just scratching the surface. I think that falls in that category, that there's opportunity there, but ultimately it comes down to people. Ultimately it comes down to like people and communication, and how you can you can have the smartest people in the world, and if you can't relay it to your players, and you can't get them to make the changes that they need to make to help them in a competitive atmosphere, it's it's at that point you're talking about more academics than what we're interested in. So there's a lot that we're pushing ourselves to kind of understand and to apply and to include in our programs. But at the same time, we want to try to keep things as simple as we can for our players who need to be able to train a certain way, but then go compete, in the moment and not worry about everything else.
One or two more we have time for. Is there anything else?
John, heading into the new park from a business perspective, do you feel the ball club needs more star power? And will the new ballpark affect your outlook from a personnel standpoint at all?
I don't see us making any baseball personnel decisions for marketing purposes, if that makes sense. I think the only way to really market a team is to win. I think it's pretty cut and dry. I think anything shy of that is, probably gonna, lead you down a bad path, and so we'll try to stay out of that. And as far as shaping the club to the park or how it's gonna play, we were talking about that yesterday too. Like, we think we have an idea, but we're not gonna know until we get in there and play and get some some games behind us and a real understanding of the different dynamics, whether it's the surface or whether it's the outfield dimensions or foul ground, how much area there is there, or obviously the wind or now lack of wind or the air conditioning. There's so many factors that we just don't know about yet. So we're going to try to put the best club we can together, and then as we learn about it, we'll adjust for those learnings. But I can't sit here and tell you that we really understand it just yet.
Thank you. You got one more?
Yeah. Are there any medical updates that we need to know about?
Just one. It's Palumbo came out of that start this weekend where his blister flared back up again. So he's not, even though we told you he was going to pitch in the fall league, he's now not going to pitch in the fall league. It's kind of like when we announced that he was going to start, and then he sprained his ankle, and then we told you an hour later he wasn't going to start. So I think that's the only one at this point. I mean, we got a bunch of guys that are, end of season stuff they played through, and obviously about Jeff and Logan and these guys and Maz that just we just feel like time will heal all those things. So
There's nothing on Maz in terms of having seen Liberty or anything?
No, nothing new on that one. I just had a couple quick things. One, I want to mention that Willie Calhoun, kind of didn't really touch on it today, but nothing bad at all. It's not anything related to the medical side, but I know when spring training didn't make the club, and at a different point we sent him down, and I just feel remiss not mentioning what a tremendous year he had. Really credit to the staff and Jose and Stephanie and Jace and everybody for pushing him, but he put the work in, and as much as anybody, he took a huge step this year, and I want to make sure we recognize that. I also want to recognize Grady Woodward. Happy birthday! He's sitting here. It's his son's
double
birthday.
digits, 10 years old today.
Yeah. So those are a couple of things. And then the last one, I just want to you guys, the media. I know different points during the season where you probably want to strangle us, and we might want to strangle you, and just me, not us. Woody's great. But no, I appreciate. I know your industry has gone through a ton of change. I know that some of you we talked about some of the stresses that adds to your lives, and then obviously kind of the socially the whatever people talk about the media. But we appreciate organizationally the work you guys do, even though sometimes it might make it more challenging on us. We're not quite ready to say something yet, and you push us to do it. But you carry them kind of our news to our fans, and we just want to let you know we appreciate you.